Hey, well, welcome to Deep Dive. I'm Amy.
Oh, and I'm Shane. I wasn't ready to say hello. Hello.
Hello. we are with you live, if you couldn't tell that. So welcome to Deep Dive. Tonight we talk about scriptures, we interview folks, we have a lot of fun together, and we are so happy that you are with us today. So, Shane, this past Sunday, you preached about a passage from John 14. So we find ourselves here in this kind of farewell discourse that Jesus delivers to his followers. And particularly in this passage, we get the section of scripture that says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And I thought you did just a beautiful job of kind of expanding beyond, like a plaque that we might put on our wall with this scripture. It's one of those that everybody kind of knows by heart. You can read through this section of scripture and it's maybe the only thing you're going to hear because it's so familiar. So I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things, right? Is to sort of unpack those things because they've just become sanitized or, like we lose the context of, the part I try to play up on, and this was, I have to admit, it's like, this isn't necessarily in the text, but I think it's well within an imagination of the text of the disciples being like, no, say what again? You're going to prepare a place for us. You tell us we know where you're going. But if we don't know where you're going, and how are we supposed to know there? And then he comes back and just says, I'm the way you get there. It's hard for us to hear that without, 2,000 years of all the different theological developments that gone into hearing that and just hearing those in our mind, because we hear those things. And particularly if you are like us that have lived in the Bible Belt for any period of your life, you hear those and you can't help but hear, the essentially the subtext of every altar call ever. Yes. And it's, so it's hard to hear those in a different context. And honestly, it's a difficult passage to know how to preach it during this time. Yeah. And so I try to approach it from that standpoint, and some of that honestly is for my own sanity. Is like, how can I read this in a way to hear it as though those disciples heard it, as that early church heard it? A thing I didn't necessarily preach about, but it's there in the text, is the name early Christians took on, followers of the way, which is interesting. You see the roots of it there. And of course it pops up later in Acts and places like that. But I think that's an interesting development. And you see how they get to that language with a verse like that from John. It's also interesting always to notice just how the Gospels are different, and this is a unique one of John. John doesn't have the same, Sermon on the Plain, Sermon on the Mount, big discourse, but he has this one. And I think it'd be really easy to get wound up of saying who's right, who's wrong, what's the proper chronology. I think it would be, you could think that way, but to me, I think it's an easy one to sort of solve in my mind, because it's if we all went in a world where there was no virus, went and attended the same concert or attended the same movie, I think we'd all walk away with different impressions, particularly one that's that impactful and it has so many different sort of features of it. And that's the way I choose to interpret it. That John was able to hear something in the life of Jesus that struck him, that's valuable to us. But it wasn't necessarily the same things that, the author of Mark or Q, if we wanted to get into that, was able to write down. So, yeah, that's kind of the way I square that one. I don't know about you. Is that one of those phrases that like is just fallen into the Christian cliche world, the way, the truth, the life for you?
It is, absolutely. Yep. And when I think about John with all of these I am statements from Jesus, I always remind myself kind of along the lines you're talking about, that John's actually written down, we think, the very latest. So there's some time to kind of mull over, to think and reflect on these experiences with Jesus. And there's more theology in my mind kind of interwoven into the Gospel of John versus particularly Mark. It would have been like very fast. Mark continues to use the phrasing immediately, because they're just trying to get the story out to people.
Yeah. You certainly see that in John's poetic flair, which is evident from in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. When you get things like that at the very beginning, you see that poetic flair developing because of a later authorship. Again, but that's something I'm thankful for. It doesn't discredit it for me knowing that. It's just, it's something Yeah, I'm really thankful for. I didn't really get into it. I'm always curious because we have such a modern understanding of words like truth, and I didn't really dive into it in the sermon much. So I think the way when we can get to a little bit, even though he's speaking sort of figuratively, non-figuratively, couple different modes, I think we can get there on that. That one's a little bit understandable. The life, the source of life, we can get to that. And you can get to that from the perspective of, Jesus, the one that provides the resurrected eternal life. But I tend to get that as Jesus is the source of the eternal source of life, which is life-giving to us both now and later. But truth, what's the Greek word for truth? Eirene, I think isn't that it? Or is that peace? I can't remember.
I can't remember either. My Greek teacher would be so disappointed.
I know. I am pretty sure it's Eirene, but that word truth is hard for us to grapple with here, because truth we have a funny relationship with that word, with truth, especially right now, because we're all becoming so well versed in the squishiness of truth and the ability to manufacture truth out of repetition, or, just simply repetition. And so, and this is a pre-scientific age. And so that's the one I struggle to interpret for a modern person to hear, other than, I don't know. I don't, that's one frankly, a better theologian than myself could do something with that one. But that's the one I kind of shied away from in the sermon. Because to me, it's more of a text about presence and fidelity than it is necessarily truth in any sort of like objective sharing core truths of the gospel sort of sense. And so, that's why I just really focused on talking about, it's important to remind ourselves of this time, that necessarily having all the right answers and knowing everything really doesn't have as much value as we think it does. As a person of faith, what has value right now is just doing our best in a moment-to-moment basis to try to be faithful to Jesus's call. That's still a big ask, but you can easily get overwhelmed with the other one. I don't know what it's going to be like. Believe me, I'm somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about what's life going to be like a month, 6 months, a year from now. But I recognize in myself that can be very anxiety inducing. And it's a reminder that all that is being asked of me in this moment is just to recognize God's presence in my life and try to be faithful in that. And that's the way I chose to see that passage, the way, the truth, the life, to recognize that, Jesus is the answer now. And Jesus will be the answer 6 months from now. But, right now I have God's presence to sort of guide me. And I think there's some good news in that, particularly when we can all feel so lost and powerless right now.
Absolutely. And that makes me think about all the verses in the Bible that say, do not be afraid, don't worry. And that is very hard right now. And, what do we do with that now? Where does that live within this faithfulness?
Yeah. I mean, this one had some of that. Don't let your hearts be troubled.
Yep.
That one, it would be interesting to explore. I did mention this in the sermon a little bit, but I think the way that phrasing goes there is very interesting, because it is recognizing that anxiety, I know we talked about this with Dr. Baxter, of saying it is a natural reaction to trauma to cause anxiety and things like that. And I think the challenge comes from once we recognize that, say, oh, I'm feeling what I'm feeling because of this trauma. I think that's what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is not saying you shouldn't have this natural reaction. I want to be clear about that. I think what verses like this, don't let your heart be troubled or don't be anxious, are not saying, oh, if you're a Christian, you never worry about getting a terminal illness. That's not what it's saying. I think it's talking about the place you choose to dwell when you become conscious of those things. So in an instance like this, we're always going to cycle. We're going to be anxious. We're going to be upset. Like me, it's kind of a loop. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm not fine. I'm not fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm not fine. And it just kind of keeps going in a loop. But what I think God has called me in that is just mindfulness of God's presence in my life. And to, spend more time in prayer, spend more time in meditation, spend more time in just looking about the step in front of me instead of the 1,000 steps away. And to me, when Jesus says, don't let your hearts be troubled, it's more like, let's bring our scope down for now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hold our scope to those little small steps. And in that, our hearts will not be as troubled because we're just focused on faithfulness. It's complicated though, because it's very easy to slip back into that. Oh, I feel bad because I'm anxious, and I'm not being faithful because I'm anxious. And even as a pastor who knows better, I still slip into that. I don't know about you. Do you go through those same cycles of stuff, Amy?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, for sure. And so that don't let your hearts be troubled, I think it's showing us too the recognition that Jesus understands that their hearts were troubled, that our hearts are troubled, but he is there. He is with them. God is with us through all of these times. So it's not, like you're saying, not trying to just take it away or ignore it, which is probably the worst thing that you could do, but to remember that God is with us even when our hearts are troubled.
Yeah.
So in another part of the sermon, you brought up something that I thought was really interesting. And it was something along the phrasing of, we have maybe fear during this time or anxiety that the stage that we're in, this kind of cooped up at home, the social distancing, that it won't come to an end. But then on the other hand, we may have that same kind of fear and anxiety that this time will end too quickly. And I got to tell you, that hit me exactly where I am. So I really appreciated that being actually vocalized, because I feel myself kind of ping-ponging between those two, particularly as things begin to open in Nashville, and it terrifies me.
Yeah. That was, I had found sort of some of the initial concept of that in an article that was in Wired a couple weeks ago, and basically talking about this phenomenon of us all not having a firm grasp on time right now, and why time feels sort of squishy and nebulous. There was a joke I put in there from someone I saw on Twitter talking about, this is a special type of leap year where February had 29 days, March had 300 days, and April was 5 years. It's it was funny even saying that to some people, that my wife had said that she got that with February and March, but for some reason April felt like a blur to her, which just kind of I think goes to the point of even making of that fear, is that time is not really flowing the same for all of us. I was struck by too, just thinking about like Socrates a little bit and understanding like his understanding of time, and that we need events to mark time. And that could be a factor now because there's really not a lot of events. And even because we can sometimes culturally, there's often big cultural events, but most cultural events are shut down now. And then we're even reaching a point where even things like big television shows are starting to shut down because they haven't been able to finish their seasons. Maybe the Michael Jordan documentary, for those who are following it, is the closest thing to some of these things, because at least it's coming on every Sunday night. Maybe that's something, but that creates that sense of lost time, which gets us stuck in the middle between I'm fearful that things are going to end too quickly, and I'm fearful that I'm going to be stuck this way forever. And I'm very much like you. I ping pong back and forth. I would say for me, I'm typically more fearful things will end too quickly. Mm-hmm. But some of that is due to my age. I'm not worried, and my health status. I'm not necessarily worried about being someone in a risk demographic. So that's a reflection of that one. But, and I don't know. And just I have a degree of contentness and contentment. I don't know what the right word here is in life right now. But there's this concept in psychology, and I don't know how widely talked about it is. It's the concept of a double bind, that a lot of our major life stresses are when we feel like we can't make a good decision the other way. So to put it in marital terms, it's when a husband and wife get in a fight. The husband knows he's wrong, but he also knows there's some seeds of truth in a fight, and he doesn't want to apologize, because then he feels like that's admitting some sort of weakness or conceding grounds in a fight he really believed in. But in the other regard, he knows he should apologize, but that's not an acceptable thing for him either. I mean, that's a really simplistic one, but you get stuck between these poles of things, and it's a failure to necessarily think of third options or more imaginative options. But the argument of double binds is that a lot of our major life stresses are a result of self-created double binds, where we feel like we mentally can't get out of something. What's tough about this double bind is we all have such limited agency to do anything about it. So, we're stuck between worried it's going to end too soon and worried we're going to be stuck this way forever. How do we get out of that? I don't know, but I think that's a valuable way to frame it, because it's a Pong video game of stress that we're just bouncing back and forth on. And I think it's helpful to be aware of that. And that's why I was so thankful to find sort of someone describing it in that way. Because I don't know if most of us would have the ability to put those type of words to it.
No, absolutely not. Because like I said, this is what I've been feeling, particularly last week, I guess, as things started to open here in Nashville.
Yeah.
And so there was that ping ponging for me, but I hadn't really kind of conceptually framed it in that way. Like, oh, well, yeah, I am holding both of these at the same time. And sometimes I lean more this way and sometimes I lean more towards the other direction, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, I think we all also we have all always had assumptions in our mind, whether we put them out loud or not, about when we thought things would be closer to normal. And what's interesting is I think we all have different benchmarks of that. So, one benchmark for me as a parent closer to normal would be my daughter is attending her elementary school, like is on campus attending, and that is normal-ish for me. But other people have that. Maybe it's go in the office. Maybe it's be able to go to a concert. I don't know what it is. But we all have different benchmarks of getting closer to normal. But we also have timelines of that in our mind. And so as we hear information that disrupts those timelines, I think that's a source of stress. So, for me on a personal level, I guess was it yesterday, Anthony Fauci was doing a testimony in front of one of the Senate panels, and he was talking about the idea of schools returning in the fall. Now, I think they were specifically talking about collegiate schools, but still the idea of schools getting out in the fall, and he just thought it was really, we weren't going to be able to have the testing capacity or be there. And so it was really kind of pouring cold water on the idea of collegiate students returning to school in the fall. As a parent hearing that disrupts my interpretation, because I have made the assumption, even though I know this is a long way to go, at the very least we'll get kids back in school, and so while I typically don't think why I typically be a little more in the camp of I'm worried this is too soon, something like that happens and I think, oh my gosh, we're going to be stuck this way forever. And it's just the ping pong match of death, just awful.
Yeah. And information comes in so fast, right? And it feels like the ground is always kind of shifting about where we are, because you hear things like that or other information that comes out and you're like, oh, well, I didn't know that 5 minutes ago. And then it's maybe 15 minutes later and you're like, oh, well, I didn't know that 15 minutes ago. So it's just a lot of information coming in, which reminds me again of Dr. Baxter a couple of weeks ago saying, limit all of this to 1 hour.
Yeah.
So it's not this roller coaster of things are changing every few minutes for us.
Yeah, I have this habit sometimes, and when I'm being my best self, I can do this. And it's sometimes I'll catch myself and I'll be reading something like Twitter, and then I'll find myself being anxious for it, and I'll just take it and throw the phone. I can do that now because my phone is terrible. It is. You might be able to see this. It's literally held together by tape. Yeah, there you go. You can see some tape. It's cracked. It's awful. Unfortunately, I have a new phone that's coming in. And so I don't know if I'll be able to throw it, but for now I gotta, maybe another week or so of this good practice. If that's enough, just throwing it,
That may be why you have the tape on your phone.
Yeah, that may be it. I also had this other practice. I tried to make a thing for a while, is that if someone was debating the facts about something and you feel like you really nailed it, but you pulled out your phone to verify and you got it right, you did the phone drop, which I think is really dramatic and really works it, because it's like the mic drop, except it's a phone, so it's, maybe you can drop it on a couch or a bed or something like that. But try these at home. We're all home now. More soft surfaces at home than in the office. So it's a good one to try. Well, every week we like to give you recommendations about distractions, things you might enjoy, things that you might learn something from. I don't know. Sometimes they're serious. Sometimes they're silly. Frequently they're silly. There's a lot of Disney related content. Oh, there was a big Disney one.
Whoa.
Okay, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm leaving that to you. I'm sorry. I saw this late last night.
Don't you dare.
Yes. All right. Anyways. All right. So the thing I'm going to recommend this week is a book I just started reading. It's called Anti-Fragile, Things That Gain from Disorder. It's by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I don't know. It's got I've had a lot of people recommend it to me, because it's just talking about things that honestly improve as a result of disorder, which I think might be an interesting thing for churches and organizations to be thinking about right now, because there is a lot of disorder out there. So that's what I'm reading. It's interesting. It's kind of a heavy read, but so far so good. Amy, you?
Yep. So mine is the Disney announcement, which is for Disney Plus. They are releasing on July 3rd, Hamilton.
Over a year before it was supposed to.
Over a year before it was supposed to, because it's Disney and they are the best. And Hamilton's coming right to your homes. It's very exciting.
That's cool. Now, do you know anything about how is this filmed? I mean, I assume it's not just they put a camera out in the audience and aimed it at the stage. I assume. I don't know how they've done it. I haven't seen details about how they recorded it. It's not a film, is it? I mean, it's not like...
No. This is like a live recording of the actual Hamilton play.
Okay, so that's what I thought. So it's not like the recent version of Les Mis that was sort of...
No.
Yeah, okay. And that's what I'm curious about. I mean, because it can't just be a camera out there looking at it,
right,
or something. I don't know. It's interesting. And I wonder if is the audience live? I guess we don't know. We don't really know anything about this. So.
I don't, but it's coming out July 3rd.
Yeah. I always thought this is going to go on a long time before I see it on video, before I see it in person. But I guess I'm going to have to see it on video first. So. I'm not complaining. At least I get to see it. So.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's exciting for people. I heard Disney. I saw a lot of people just saying this was Disney saying, Disney Plus isn't doing great. We need to do something to spice it up.
For shame.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us on Deep Dive, everyone. We love to respond to your questions, and we try to do those on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes here on Wednesday nights as well, because we're setting up interviews and stuff for our Deep Dives. We got some interesting ones coming up in the coming weeks, so we hope you join us here on Deep Dive Live on Wednesday nights. But tomorrow on Thursday at noon, we will be having our live check-in, where we answer your questions live in real time, so you can ask us about our favorite chili dog recipes. Is it Cincinnati style chili that has a little bit of chocolate and cinnamon in it? Is it Chicago style, where you put those big pickled cucumbers on the top of it? What is it? What is your favorite chili dog recipe? Amy does not like that topic, but
no, terrible.
That's just what popped in my mind. I want a chili dog right now. I want a Skyline chili dog from
never.
Cincinnati, which most people hate, but I think is great. But we thank you for joining us. You can email us at questions@hborough.org. You can put questions there in the comment. We'll take them down and respond tomorrow during the live check-in. Sunday worship, 10:30 a.m., 6 p.m. One of the other big things we're working on right now is our virtual VBS, which is coming in June. You got the dates on that? I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it starts June 15th, so it'll be that week. And it is Knights of North Castle, so it's going to be very fancy and fun.
We're going to have to see what we do about outfits with that. So, we'll be doing that. It'll be streamed live. Obviously, kids won't be there. We'll be streaming live. We'll have resources you can download at home and stuff like that. And it's a way for you to just have extra spiritual developmental content for your kids or grandchildren. So we'll have some more info up on web pages and stuff real soon about that. So you'll be able to share that. You can share with folks that way every single day. They can enjoy us acting silly for the benefit of you and your family. So we're excited about that one. So any other things to plug, Amy, before we get out of here?
Yeah, still, again, we're continuing on with our small groups and Sunday school classes. And I'd love to connect anybody with those. They happen at different times throughout the week. So it's not just on Sunday mornings for Sunday school, lots of different opportunities. So I'd love to get folks connected.
Yeah, I am interested. I was thinking about this. I would be interested in starting a group that just watches through a television show together. And the one I would suggest would be The Good Place, just because it has a lot of thematic stuff to talk about with that. I don't know. That's one of those. If you're interested, message us about that. Email us about that. Shane@hboro.org. Just a small group that sort of watches an episode together and then talks about it. I think it'd be fun. I mean, that's one of those things that where you can spend time with people doing something that feels pretty natural and just talking about it. You know, that's what I would do with friends anyways. We talk about movies and television shows. I'd even want to start a movie club right now. That'd be the type of stuff we're interested in. So if you got an idea like that, shoot it to us, ask us about that. And we'll try to set it up. It'd be great. Amy's got a really big thing for terrible horror movies she would like to watch with people. So trying to think what's the worst idea for Amy to watch.
You're hitting them all. It's awesome.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I hate horror. I could not do it. I get too scared. I would not sleep. So my imagination. The movie Signs, the M. Night Shyamalan movie Signs, which is not even a horror movie, gave me trouble sleeping in graduate school. I was a grown man and I could not sleep because of M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. Yeah. Ridiculous. Well, we're so happy you joined us. We'll see you tomorrow at the live check-in. See you Sunday, 10:30 a.m. or 6 p.m. We're working on a big hymn sing coming up, where if you like some old classic hymns at the church, we're going to do like a special Sunday night concert where we pump in a lot of like the great ones everyone loves to give everyone a chance to hear those, because we just we're not engaging each other as much as we're used to in person, and we're just trying to create ways to do that. So everybody, thanks for joining us. Take care. Have a great week. See you.
Bye.